Welcome to Pilates Teacher's Manual, your guide to becoming a great Pilates teacher. I'm Olivia, and I'll be your host. Join the conversation and the Pilates community on Instagram at Pilates Teacher's Manual, and visit buymeacoffee.com/Olivia Podcasts to support the show. Today's chapter starts now. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. I am over the moon excited to share a conversation with you today with Denise Posnak Gaffney. She is a Romanas Pilates teacher who is the founder of My Bod Wellness in New Jersey. She teaches Pilates online. She also teaches in studio and offers fitness consulting for other professionals in the field. I got to connect with her just a couple weeks ago as she reached out, and I'm so glad she did because she has a really unique perspective on teaching Pilates, on blending modalities, and kind of going beyond Pilates into kind of past the technical aspects that we love and the precision that we love in Pilates, and kind of weaving in some spiritual work, some soul work as well. So I'm really excited to share with you her thoughts on that. Thank you so much for being here, Denise.
Thank you, Olivia. I'm so happy to be here, and I love your podcast and everything you're bringing to our community. And I really appreciate you and your time and this opportunity.
Oh, thanks, Denise. The first thing I always want to know is, how did you get started in your Pilates journey? Can you tell me about your first experience with Pilates?
Yes, I came to Pilates. I was 16 years old. I was in an African dance class, and I injured my back and had chronic pain until I moved to Columbia, Missouri, where I was 23. So it was about 7 years of chronic pain. But my aunt, Janice Dulac, who was a Pilates master, invited me. I was actually living in Europe, and I moved back to the States. And she said, come to Missouri. You can train in dance again. She was the head of the dance department at Stevens College, and she had a Pilates studio. And she said, you'll come here. You can dance all you want, have a new American experience, United States of America experience. And I was from California. And so come here and we'll get that going. And she gave me free Pilates lessons. Okay. And Pilates is not cheap, as a lot of us know. And private Pilates is pretty much a luxury item. So I was gifted that by my aunt. And my aunt is one of the best teachers. And I'm not just saying that because she's my aunt, but she really, truly transformed me. And I no longer identified with the back problem. It was gone. I don't like to use the word healed when I talk with people, because I think that's a very strong promise to make, but I was healed and I was a different person, and my life completely changed. So I had to do it. I had to have access to it. And so part of the reason I decided to teach was because I knew I needed access to the equipment. Okay. I was like, I'm a dancer, I'm living by, I'm budget friendly. Like, let's figure out how to be as resourceful as we can. And so for me to pay for private Pilates sessions, I didn't see as something I was going to be able to do as a dancer. And so I thought, I've got to have access. So that was my primary reason. And then I love teaching. I am a natural teacher, and it worked out as like a beautiful career for me after I laid down the dancing hat and said, we're not doing the dancing thing anymore, and let's just fully do this. So yeah, that's my Pilates story.
Can you tell me a little about your teacher training? What was it like diving deep into the classical work and doing the Romanas Pilates training?
Yeah, so it was an interesting time. Let's see, this was 2001 when I was certified. And I remember because my aunt is one of Romana's teachers. So there is a commitment to that form. And there was definitely a belief that what we were doing was Pilates and what everybody else was doing was not, right? So at the time it was this is straight from the horse's mouth. Okay. And Joseph taught these exercises, and we are learning basically from Joe, right? And that the lawsuit around the name was in the 90s. And I remember my aunt talking about that. And it was sort of this like, I don't know. It was an interesting time to be in the classical world. because we did think that we were the best. And then I will say over time, because I studied movement at the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana, I got my MFA in dance there. Things started to shift for me because I started learning all these other healing modalities like Feldenkrais, the Alexander technique, which took me to a whole other level of healing. I learned release technique, and I started to have to look at how to stay in my traditional roots while bringing other things in. And I will tell you that there is a lot of pushback at the time in the Romanas world. If you did something outside of the box, it was like, if you had a physio ball in your studio, you would be tisk, tisk, tisk. What is that doing here? Do you do something on a foam roller? Excuse me, that's not Pilates. So it was an interesting, yes, I definitely had that traditional work. And I'll end with this little note, is that the traditional work did heal me. So I know that worked for me. And so that's where also I think a challenge for me is, staying with that, knowing that it worked for me and knowing sort of what works and also blending in. So yeah, it's interesting.
But I think it's an important like inner struggle that teachers have, where you have what you learned in your teacher training, and sometimes you learn that what you learned in your teacher training isn't the best way to go about doing something, or things change over time as, more happens, or as you are exposed to more things, like you learn more things, and then you want to share those things with your students as well. I mean, even things like, I was just in a workshop a few weeks ago with Bree Dumke Helfrich, but she's Movement Design Lab on Instagram, and she's a neuro major, she's doing her PhD in neuroscience. And one of the things that came up is like almost a side note was like eccentric training for muscles is like the best way to build strength. And that's like straight out of like personal training land and that kind of movement. And then you're thinking about it in Pilates, and it's like, oh, so like when my teacher told me to resist the resistance, like, so that's what that was. Okay. And now we've got this thing to back it up. Or that, I'm a huge fan of props. I'm also a contemporary teacher. So props were never like a no-go. It was more like more props. Like, yes. You need a bigger ball. Amazing. Let's get that. But I do want to hear a little bit about like, how do you personally, like in your studios, in your classes, integrate things? Do you keep, the classical Pilates separate, or do you bring in things like, how do you find the balance for yourself? Because it's probably different for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really interesting question. I definitely don't separate. I mean, at this point, I have, it reminds me kind of like of therapy, right? All of the work that you've done on yourself. So you've done energy work. You've done, I don't know, you've had your therapy sessions, you've done Reiki, there's all these tools you have. So you're in a state and you have a problem to solve, and you just start drawing on what works. And at this point in my teaching, it's really about having had all of those experiences in my body, and then channeling. So a lot of my work has to do with who is in front of me. And I will, I'll say to people, I'm like, your body, I don't ever do this, but your body is telling me to do this, and I just go with what comes up with that particular body. And I think that the blending is natural. I will say in the beginning, and I think this is, it's interesting, is the contemporary technique. I studied with a friend of mine who was, or I was one of her like guinea pigs when she was in New York, Kelly Kane's studio. What's Kelly's studio? It's like Kinesio something. Anyways, they're super contemporary. And that training really emphasized that the teachers were very knowledgeable, without an orthodox system, and that their creativity was really valued. And in my training, your creativity was not really valued. Okay. Your commitment to the work, and even again, like I said, there were sort of no-nos on certain things. And I think there's a lot of fear in the classical teachers, like I need to stick to what's correct. And so in terms of blending in, that was a process, right? I've been doing this for 20 years. So I was very much orthodox. And I like that too. I like having a routine because I feel more confident for myself. Like I have more energy, mental energy, when I know what to do, and then I do it sort of my way. But adding and blending in, I started to experiment. And I think I was able to do it the best when I branched off from a studio and I was no longer working for somebody, right? So that is, I think, a huge piece of this particular journey for teachers. And sometimes you're not allowed to do certain things in studios, depending on where you're working. And Olivia, I know that you've worked at several different types of studios and you've talked about that. So I'm curious, in your particular experience, have you gone into studios where they're like, yeah, we know blah, blah, blah here?
Yeah, sometimes there's, it'll be a safety concern kind of thing. Like I teach at Club Pilates. There's certain exercises, anything with no springs is a no-no in a group class. Anything, short spine massage inversions where you have spring resistance assisting you in that. And their concern is, there could be 12 people in the room. We want you to be able to watch everyone and everyone to be safe. So you can do those things in privates, no problem. But so there are certain exercises like that. Sometimes it's equipment sensitive. Like I've taught in gyms where you have a mat. And if you want to do anything that requires more than a mat, you're going to have to find a way to do it with just the mat. So there's those kind of limitations as well. And I do see the most freedom with my clients who are just my clients, who I see like just as myself, where there's more of a connection. And also when you've worked with someone for a really long time, there's also a level of trust that if you ask them, hey, like, let's grab that resistance band and try this thing, that even if it doesn't work, there's this trust that we're going to try something together. So I do think that opens up the freedom because you don't have the limits of a class structure. Like I've taught at studios that they wanted the class kind of planned in blocks of 18 minutes because they were like 55-minute classes. And so this was the warm-up block, this was the meat and potatoes block, and this was like the cool down block. Or studios where you've got instructors evaluating you as like quality control, where you're getting feedback on your teaching, which can be really helpful. But when that's, these points, and if you didn't do enough of a side lying exercise or something, you lose a point. So like there's definitely structure. There's like pros to being in that structure, but in terms of really finding your voice as a teacher and not, because I feel like when we start teaching as well, another tangent, we don't have our own voice. We have our teacher's voice. Yes. And you're saying your teacher's words and finding your own words to say. Like even when you're talking about the classical method that I had to teach it my way, like finding your way to teach is a process and it takes a lot of time. But I do think kind of taking the blinders off a little bit and then like, for some reason I have this like rodeo bull, just like letting it out of the pen and just letting yourself kind of like go out and explore and not have those limitations is awesome.
Yes, I love that. I think that one of the things that comes up is not only are you learning like your voice, right, giving a certain exercise, but you're learning your voice in combination with who's in front of you, because you might have a voice that works for certain people where you say a thing or you show a thing and they get it. And then you do the same thing with somebody else and the voice has to change. Yeah. So it really is, I feel, a process. Again, it's a long process. The factors that are going to help you, create that voice are being confident, right? And and confidence often comes by just knowing that you can lead somebody using somebody else's. It's like your children, your own children. My daughter like does what I do, because she's learning life, and it's like I do what mommy does because I see it. That kind of works, right? But over time, we start to learn what we do, and it's the same thing with teaching, and it is that process. Yeah. So I think that, and I think understanding the person in front of you is another level of education, because that dealing with personalities, dealing with resistance, and as to, dealing with physical issues that are different on every body, right? So the creativity piece, I wanted to note, that's what I was thinking. And now it came back around to this. So when I moved to New York City in 2010, I had two jobs. I taught at a studio there. And they were classical, but that's where I saw a foam roller in a studio for the first time. And I was like, this is interesting. This was not allowed in my aunt's studio, So that was interesting. And then they were bringing in the melt technique. Okay. But the melt technique, it was interesting because some people would take that technique and they were sort of teaching it, but they weren't certified in it. And this is another piece that I would love to talk about in this particular conversation. So there were some Pilates teachers in the room who were certified in melt, and they were teaching melt. Then you have other teachers who have every right to use the roller, but they were doing things that looked like melt, or maybe they were borrowing from the other teachers, but they weren't certified in melt. And so that came up as an issue within that studio. You don't have the right to teach melt, right? So this was an interesting kind of moment. And it wasn't until I left there, I was able to kind of blend. But in terms of creativity, I also want to note my second job in New York at the same time was going into people's apartments and having to teach Pilates without equipment. And that's what you noted about the gym. And that's where I got, that's where you start to learn and devise and create. And it made me realize that ultimately, that's what Joseph Pilates was doing. If we're really going to teach Pilates, what did he do? He had a client who couldn't do X, Y, and Z. He built a piece of equipment for them. He was the creator. He was a creative. He was always about morphing and building on the technique. And I don't believe, had he been alive, through this time, the technique wouldn't look like it looks now, So I think that piece where I just kind of got to grab that confidence and say, and that is good teaching, right? Good teaching is alive, it's present, and it's moving with life moving, right? So it's always going to be morphing. And also, I think there is something to be said about roots and routine, because I do think if humans who are trying to learn a new movement technique, if it's too much, too many ideas and too many things to think about, they are not going to be able to follow. So I would say, that kind of, there's a lot to talk about on this particular subject.
This is something that I, see in my classes every day if I'm teaching, a beginning class, an intermediate class, and an advanced class. In the beginning class, I'm really big on options and letting people choose how they want to do a thing, with the emphasis that it's not wrong, that they can do it this way or they can do it this way. And this isn't, better or worse. This is just one way of doing it or a different way of doing it. And, I might give a few options on a few exercises in the beginning class, and where you get to the advanced class and it's very much, you know your body, yourself. How do you want to do? You want to be heavy in the hamstrings when you do feet and straps? Do you want to be heavy in the abs when you do feet and straps? How do you want, where do you want to work? How do you want to explore this? But you can't throw that at someone when they're just learning it. You have to build to that. And as someone who loves movement, enjoys movement, I've made the mistake, or maybe not the mistake, but the learning experience in the past that I have been well, you could do it like this, or you could do it like this, or you could do it like this. And the person's just tell me what to do. Where do I put my foot?
Yes.
What springs? Where are we going? And that's what I think makes movement so fun as well, is that there's more layers, and the more you explore, there's always more coming back to you.
I love that. And I will say, so my movement journey was, classical ballet, dance, jazz, classes where this is what you do, X, Y, and Z, boom, boom, follow, follow, follow. Then Pilates, again, in a form that was move this way, don't make a move before you do X, starting from, and that's why I think my Aunt Janice she is a master teacher, because I think she understands how people learn, and that's just a natural thing for her. And she gives what can be handled in the moment, right? And it's brilliant. And so that building block, learning a language, and the way that it was taught to me was it worked for my body, right? And then I did my graduate work at the University of Illinois. And as a dancer, in order to be a fully realized dancer, you cannot be controlling everything. You have to be open. The body has to be open. You can dance that way. That's how a lot of ballet dancers dance, right? But to have that freedom of movement required a freedom of thinking. And then my education philosophy changed, which was that we shouldn't be telling people, how to live and do and blah, 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 but that it should come from them, right? But to your point about when you're telling you step into now, what do I do with that Pilates? Here I am, I'm telling you what to do. But now I believe that that's sort of effed up. And I don't think that's actually very healthy mentally, right? But now I'm in a room with somebody and I say, I'll say sometimes to clients, what do you want to work on today? Or how would you do that? And they're just like, rarely, I would say like 1% of the time or 0.1% of the time, they give me an answer. They really want me. They're so tired of having to figure every effing thing out that they need somebody to just tell them what to do. Do you know what I'm saying? And so there is that sort of, and I get it too, because I'm a mom of 2 young kids that are like, it's insane. Life is literally insane every day. It's different every day. There is no consistency. You know what I'm saying? And then you've got pandemic. You had to learn how to live in a whole new way. And you've got these kids that are changing, and every day is a whole new way. And nothing, you can't rely on anything. So when I go into a class, it's like, do not ask me to like, I don't want open space. Like I want you, I just need a guide. I need a mom. You know what I mean? I need I need a boss, and I'm my own boss. It's another place, right? Like no one's really telling me what to do. So I do think that, again, it's that balance, right? And over time, once they've had that technique of, okay, now I'll say it reminds me of jazz musicians. I think that there's a process in the jazz musician like curriculum. It's like you learn how to imitate all of the best players. You learn all the standards before you go and just improv on your own. So I think there's something beautiful about that, understanding a technique and adopting something for what it is. And then, hey, flow, right? And you'll feel the confidence to flow. So I think there's something to that particular process.
That's a beautiful way of putting it. And I think that makes sense, as a teacher, as a student, that having that structure, having that foundation, having that there to support you. And then once you know that, then you can make choices like about how this feels, or maybe I want to do it this way, or try it on this day like this, or, maybe I don't do that or whatever. I love that. And I think that this is also speaking to something that I also wanted to chat with you about, of moving from Pilates, which classical Pilates especially, but contemporary Pilates as well, moving from this very technical, these are the springs, this is the exercise, to incorporating deeper work or work from other angles where you're seeing the person a little bit more as a whole person and not just a whole body. Because I love the phrase, teach the body that's in front of you, but it's the body and the mind and the spirit. And, how are they sleeping? Are they eating? Like, what are their kids up to? Like all of like this very complicated human being with all these relationships that we only see for, an hour a week. And, how do I best support the whole person through this body work that I do, but also, adding some more stuff in.
Yes. So, our culture generally views like the body as separate from the self. We talk about the body, right? I remember being in graduate school, and Becky Nettlefield she was one of the teachers. Like I had a class of students that I was teaching, and we were getting reviews by our professors. And she said, you say the lift, what did she say? It was something like lift the stomach, or, lift the leg. I was using the in terms of for body parts. And she changed, she was like, it's got to be it's got to be it is them. It is not like the arm that you have, it is my arm, right? And myself. And when people go to work out, they're generally like trying to conquer a thing, which is their body, this thing that is disruptive, this thing that doesn't look how they want it to look, this thing that gets in the way and gets tired, this thing that gives them back pain, right? Instead of seeing and being in their body. And what I've noticed over time is that what started to happen naturally with my students, and I think that in the beginning, this goes back to that process of being able to expand it beyond the technical. is like the technical and the physical is enough in the beginning. That's a lot, it's a lot to like, can you try to lift your arm without also lifting your shoulder? Like, what? That's weird. Can you like isolate your rib? Like, can you just move your ribs back? Like, that's like that's a lot of work. And then they're stepping out of the room and they're thinking about it when they're brushing their teeth or, this is a long time. But as my clients, my students, as we'd go on in the work and they've got the technique down to a certain extent. They've got the choreography down, the movements down. Then you start to see what's really stopping them, where the fear is. So they're afraid, they're afraid of letting go in their body. They're afraid of settling in, into the mat. They're afraid of what would happen if I like really curled up and had to look at, this is a main thing for some of my clients who have extra weight, like I have to look at my stomach. Right? Like, I don't even want to curl up. I feel sick when I have to do that because it makes me feel like a horrible person. So then there's limitations in their movement because there's limitations in their brain, right? And it's like a lot of stuff going on. And so we get to a point where unless it started for me naturally to just start to, let's go a little bit beyond this. This is not about your back being tight and you can't get up into teaser. Oh, this is about you not being willing to give in or you being afraid of X, Y, and Z. And then also like energetically, you're coming to your sessions, you have nothing to give, right? Why is that? Oh, you're not sleeping. Why is that? Oh, you're running around. Your brain is not here. Why is that? So we have to go beyond. And so what I started to realize, and I think this is, again, that process for teachers, it's going to take a while for you to even be able to get there and create that or offer that kind of support. It's going to take a while for you to get there with your clients and for them to trust you, but be starting to understand that it is, again, more than the physical. And how do we offer that kind of support in a safe way for us too? Because I will say, going back to like you and I talked about different training modalities and what you're bringing in, I am not a therapist. I do not say I'm a therapist. I'm not going to go into that particular thing, but anything that's related, right, to the body and how we can maybe start to ask some questions and connect to I talk about our core self. So I talk about the core, then I talk about it physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, how we can reconnect to ourselves, whatever that means for you, that's going to help you in your physical expression.
Yeah. It's so funny that you're saying this because an episode on Pilates Students Manual that just came out or will come out in the future because this is happening in the past was about the roll up. And I'm, sharing, well, you can use a resistance band or you can use the roll down bar. We can work eccentrically and just focus on rolling down and not rolling up, and we can build strength there. But the note that I ended that episode on was like, there's also a mental component. If you know that the roll up comes after the 100 and you hate it because you don't think you're good at it, or you can never get up and you're self-conscious, or you're having some conversation with yourself about, how terrible it is, you're not going to be able to roll up. And it doesn't matter whether you use a resistance band or your arms or anything, that if you have that belief already that I can't do this, you're not going to be able to do this. And so I love that you're, taking the time and really seeing the person, because I know as teachers, we've had people who come into class and you're like, I'm glad you're here, but you are not here. You are somewhere else. And sometimes, it's just moving, especially in group classes. It's just like you just need to like move. And that's beautiful that we can offer that for you. But especially when you're working one-on-one and you can have that conversation, be like, hey, like what's going on? Like, how can I support you? Hi there. I hope you're enjoying today's chapter so far. There's great stuff coming up after the break too. Be sure to subscribe wherever you're listening and visit buymeacoffee.com/Olivia Podcasts to support the show. There you can make a one-time donation or become a member for as little as $5 a month. Membership comes with some awesome perks, including a shout out in the next episode, a monthly newsletter, a monthly Zoom call with me, and more. You can also visit links.oliviabioni.com/affiliates to check out some sweet deals on products I use and love. Now back to the show. I do want to hear about, because in group classes, we're giving, and private sessions, we're giving. We're holding space, which can be very demanding of us. And so can you tell me a little bit about how you find the energy balance, or do you catch yourself before you've gone too far? I usually end up a little bit too far and I'm like, I'm really exhausted. I should have dialed that back.
I love that. That is the truth about me. I think that over time, though, I did that so much that I would get really sick. And I'm almost like physically, ill. I remember when I launched My Bod Wellness as an official business, and all of a sudden I went from being a Pilates teacher who was kind of doing it with my notebook. I didn't even have other people had phones at the time, like putting their schedules in phones and like digitizing everything. And I was still writing clients' names down. And, so like I had this is my trade and I'm going to teach whoever, but I wasn't a business person. But the moment I launched my online platform in 2012, there was oh my gosh, I had to get a lawyer. I had to, set up LLC. I had to get contracts. I had, there was so much. And I remember working like a crazy person, and I got so sicker than I've ever been. And I missed out on my favorite vacation of the year, which is going to California to my uncle's at Christmas. And I was sick the whole time. And it sounds sort of silly and sort of like, oh, you got sick on a vacation. No, it was very meaningful to me. And it was so upsetting to me. And so I really realized at that moment that it's not worth it. And my body I am very sensitive that way. And I just can't. And I don't like being sick. I do not like feeling unhealthy. I think it's sort of a blessing. And it also tends to make me, I think sometimes I don't do as much maybe as I can, or I'm not doing it right because I am preserving my health, and I will not do something beyond what will, take me into that place. But I will say, I like you said, like stopping before it's gone down that road. I'm 45 now. I definitely have learned how to do that to a certain extent. I think it's vital for teachers. I had a business coach who said once, she was amazing. She said, all right, we're going to look at your schedule and we are going to look at where you're putting in your vacation now. And you are putting those dates on. They are not changing. And I think for us as business owners, or even if you're not a business owner, if you are a teacher and you're, freelancing and you're doing all these things, you have to be really solid and confident about and know that the white space has to be written in and it cannot be changed. And then over time, I will say because there's a lot of pressure as a teacher, especially if you're teaching privates. Somebody wants you, needs you. They need you for that hour, right? And it's very hard to cancel or reschedule. But I've gotten much better at saying, you know what? I'm starting to feel sick. Well, now in COVID time, that's a whole other thing. It's like, hey, I have the sniff, this beginning of a sniffle, and no one's going to work with it. You know what I mean? It's like, it's whatever. We're in sort of a weird zone right now, but we're talking pre-COVID. It's like, no, I'm putting myself down tomorrow and I will reschedule. I think trust has a lot to do with it, Olivia. Trusting that the money is going to come, because this is a big thing for us as teachers. We're not just doing this because we love it and we're like independently wealthy and we can just go ahead and just give no, we need a job, this is work. So we need money and we don't want to lose clients. We're scared of losing clients. So we're going to push. And if we drop out on them, so it's about being really smart about taking care of yourself and taking care of them. So what is the offer? I have to reschedule today. I mean, whatever, if you have to do it all the time, that's a problem, but it's okay. Right. And then being generous with your clients in a way. If I have to late cancel on my clients, they get a late cancel credit from me. Okay. So if I'm saying, hey, I have to late cancel you. I'm putting in a late cancel credit in your account because I have to do this on you. So I feel like that balance of taking care of yourself while taking care of your clients, I think you need to look at both ends. You need to know you need to take care of yourself. You also, if you have that, that other piece, you'll feel better about it. And so 100%, I think I will add this little note, we give out a lot of energy. And especially if you're going to go into the zone of going beyond the body, because it's scary. You have to feel confident doing that. And you have to be also open to potentially some pushback, which is a challenge. And when you're coaching somebody, that's tough. Like, it's vulnerable stuff. So then it's vulnerable for you. And then you've taken on these, a lot of energy during the day. So like an end of the day ritual, I think, is really important. I had an energy worker I work with who talks about doing like a sort of mental shower at the end of her workday with clients. So she just sits and she imagines like the water coming down and washing off all of the energy. And then the same business coach I was talking about, the vacation she like created visually like almost like a portal, in her body where she could release the energy, because we hold it. So how can we release it? And so those kinds of things I think are very helpful when you're taking on a lot of people.
I know that I teach group classes back to back, about 4 in a row in evenings. And so when I'm getting home, it's like 9:00 at night. And what helps me is that's when I choose to like water my plants. And so then I get to like go around my house, stick my finger in some dirt, very like grounding, and water plants, and kind of just not listen to music, not entertain anyone, and just breathe. And like, that's a happy place for me. So like, I'm happy to do that. Even though it does seem like it's more giving on top of giving, but it's giving water and then they give back to me.
It's giving back. I want to also note, because you just said that 4 back to back, and I'm like, oh my gosh, no, thank you. I don't know if I could do that. But at this point, I don't know that I would. But 4 classes, like in privates. Here's the other piece, Olivia, that I think is important over time too as a teacher. Experimenting with your energy output within a session and being very aware of that. So if you're giving too much, and experimenting with giving just a little less, right? Can you sit back a little less? Allow the student to do more. Allow you to do less. And that can transition over time. It might have to be a lot of you in the beginning. And then over time, stepping back. I think that's another piece of sustainability, is in your particular work, how can you check in during your teaching hour, right? And then experimenting. And if people seem like, if it sort of starts to feel like I'm not giving enough, then, add a little more, turn up the volume. But doing that during a session is key too.
For the group classes, even though I'm doing 4 in a row, maybe the students in my classes know this, maybe they don't, but like I'm teaching a class and then I'm teaching it at different levels. So it's not totally different setup for everything. It's not totally different even planning for classes. It's just kind of dialing up these exercises, dialing down these exercises. And that's something I've learned because, at the studio I teach at, it's reformer, springboard, chair, Bosu, magic circle, jump board, mat, just many things, the box, of course. And I would be like, oh, I'm going to teach this level 1 class. We're going to use the box. We're going to use the springboard. We're going to be on the reformer. I'm going to teach this 1.5. We're going to use the TRX. We're going to use the Bosu. And it's like, no, we're going to use this setup and it's going to stay there for 4 hours and we'll put it back at the end of the day. So, and those are things that I found through trial and error that, wow, I'm really exhausted when I lift 12 boxes every hour for no reason when I could just leave them there for 4. So there's definitely this kind of watching yourself, seeing how you feel afterwards. I mean, one kind of fun transition that happened in COVID was that students started changing their own springs, where I was changing all of the springs on all of the reformers all of the time. And I would get bruises on the back of my wrist from pulling against the carriage and resting my wrist on the carriage. And I was like, well, this is such a weird little bruise that I have. And I was like, maybe we could offload a little bit of that. And they get to be like more in charge of their workouts. So like everyone wins. My wrist wins. Your autonomy wins. I love it. I also want to hear about your offerings, because you offer some really cool programs for both students and, consulting work for teachers and other professionals. Can you share what you're offering the community?
Yeah. So out of this my experience with the physical and then the mental, spiritual integration, I created 2 programs. One was an intensive 30-day program that I have done privately, but I've also done it in a group, and I love doing it in a group because everybody can sort of share. It's called Core Elevate. And just like we have a commitment to our physical, it's easier for us to go to our exercise classes every week for most of us. It's harder for us to do our daily practice, at least for somebody like me. It's very hard for me to actually sit down and meditate for 5 minutes, or 10 and 15 is a lot, right? So it's like, especially with, again, the little kids. So I built a program that created sort of like an exercise routine for that core connection that's mental and spiritual, with daily prompts, an accountability of being together as a group, and really a focus on 30 days of like, what is your core self? Like, how are you connecting to core? So when I teach, I do teach connect from the center and move from the center out in my students. And so it's the same philosophy for your life. Before you get on that phone call with your boss to talk about something challenging, before you go off on your child because she just like threw something across the road, connect to your core before you make a move. So move from the inside out. And so I have practices for that I've built over the study that I've done, the energy work studies. I've done the work I've done with several just mindfulness practitioners and meditation teachers and energy workers. So that's a built-in 30-day. And then I have the longer extension version of that. So at this point, my Core Align program does offer, body only. You can start with body only. Generally, I have a client right now who wants to only do the mental, physical piece because she's been working with me for like 10 years, actually 13 years. So the body stuff, she doesn't really need me in that way, but the other support she does. So it's optional. I do think that I'm learning with this program, the 6-month program, as it's fairly new. I've been doing it for about 3 years. That again, I'm coming back to like the body is enough, in the beginning. And that's where we focus. And then the add-ons of that emotional support is also really, it's an option for my clients. And so we do it it's a private program. And then in terms of the consulting I started offering business consulting in 2014, because when I launched my online business, I got a lot of press for it. I was all over, Shape, Cosmo, Glamour, Pilates, Anytime, like all that stuff. And so people started reaching out to me about how do you go online? So my business consulting was for that specifically, how to take your business online. And when COVID hit, I created a couple courses to just like got everything together really fast, all of what I do, in my business consulting, put it in a course, and then trained a lot of Pilates instructors and trainers, yoga instructors and personal trainers to transition in a nanosecond to a new way of moving, and so that is another offer that I have. It exists. And but now everybody's gone online, so they kind of have figured that piece out. So we're not doing as much of that. But so those are that's what I'm doing right now. And I love what I'm doing. I love my work. And I will say I'm like Joseph Pilates and like you, Olivia, and like a lot of people who get into this, I'm a creator and a creative. So I like to keep building and growing the offer, because to be honest, I get kind of bored if I'm doing the same thing. It's true. I mean, I want something new. I feel better. I was talking with somebody about neuroplasticity, and learning new things, helps the brain. Like, it's going to keep us alive. It's going to make us feel younger and just interested with life. And so I feel the same way in my business.
That's absolutely incredible. And I love the idea of, having a program of really making a habit of not just going to class, because most of us will go to class, but, for ourselves, especially, for teachers as well. I really enjoyed Maria Earle's Advanced Mover series. It was for teachers to do their own thing, because it's really easy at the end of your day to just be like, look, I did Pilates for 9 hours, even though most of it was standing and talking, but I was in there for 9 hours and now I'm going to bed. So it's important. And I think that especially in that longer term program that you're really setting up a habit for life. Like that's deep. That's a deep dive. Is there anything else you'd like to share? Or anything else that you're working on or you're passionate about, or last words you'd like to say?
So I think I would just say that for teachers who, you said 9 hours. And I was like, that is the other thing. I will just say that get to that place where you understand your value, get to that place where you know what is realistic for you to give, understand how much you are giving in an hour, and get confident about charging what needs to be charged for that time, because that is one of the most supportive ways to be in this particular, I think this is all like, it sort of all comes back together. Be who you are, understand what you truly can offer, start to, do the work on yourself, like you said, make sure that you are a priority, and then start stepping into that confidence, because when you overdo it, we give too much, we are trying to do too much, which we like to do a lot, then it's just not there. It's not good. It's not good for you, not good for your clients, not good for the people you work for, and so that's what I'd love to end on that, because we got to take care of ourselves, and we are givers. When you're in a service profession, you are in here because you like taking care of others, but we can totally forget to take care of ourselves. And I think that's the biggest thing. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time, Denise, for sharing your words of wisdom. Really incredible, like just your experience, the lessons you've learned. Thank you for sharing them with us. I really appreciate you coming on the show today.
Thank you, Olivia. This was great. So lovely talking with you.
Thanks for listening to this week's chapter of Pilates Teacher's Manual, your guide to becoming a great Pilates teacher. Check out the podcast Instagram at Pilates Teacher's Manual, and be sure to subscribe wherever you listen. For more Pilates goodness, check out my other podcast, Pilates Student's Manual, available everywhere you listen to podcasts. The adventure continues. Until next time.